No, I can smell it from here. Sorry. I'm just kidding. But it's some stinky stuff. Are you guys ready? All right, it is 3:15 on September 17th. I will now open this Grand County special workshop of the Grand County Commission. The workshop is on mineral lease, state PILT, and rural healthcare sales tax allocations for our calendar year of 2025. Present are Commissioners Evan Clapper, Bill Winfield, Trish Hedin, Mike McCurdy, Mary McGann, myself, Jacques Hadler, as well as our County Clerk, Gabriel Wojtek, and our Associate County Administrator, Quinn Hall. I will turn the meeting over to our clerk, Gabriel Wojtek, for the meeting. Thanks, Gabe.
Yeah, so last meeting there were presentations made by all the entities sort of in respect to these allocations that are under consideration for this discussion to be had at this workshop. That namely is mineral lease monies, rural healthcare sales tax, state PILT, and there's some requests for TRT, also the Forest Service Secure Rural Schools funding, and some of these are, some of them are a little like the Secure Rural Schools has been 50-50, and there hasn't really been any argument about that allocation split. And then there's let's see, there in the agenda packet, there are some draft resolutions that pretty much carry over the splits as they have been for the past couple of years. One of the main adjustments that would be sort of reflect in 2025's budgets with respect. In contrast with 2024 is the rural healthcare sales tax going from a 57-43 split in favor of the Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District to a 50-50 split, and that was agreed upon between those entities. So that's sort of a prearranged situation. Also, I'll just go ahead and just quickly recite the state PILT is proposed currently as a draft to be allocated 50% to Grant County EMS, 30% to the Recreation Special Service District, 20% to the Grant County School District. Mineral lease monies from UDOF, 23% to the Recreation Special Service District, 10% to the Grant County School District, and 57% to the Transportation Special Service District, and 10% to the Solid Waste Special Service District. And then there's one more, DWS mineral lease, 65% to the Recreation Special Service District and 35% to the Solid Waste Special Service District. There's a request of TRT in the amount of $500,000 from Solid Waste, $71,474 from Recreation, and $350,000 from Grand County EMS. That pretty well sums it up, what sort of we're looking at. And so, yeah, I guess I would open the floor to you all commissioners to sort of address any major talking points that might differ from the proposed draft allocations.
Thanks, Gabe. You meant Solid Waste was requesting TRT. Are we discussing that in this workshop also?
I didn't see it. Anything on the agenda?
I think when this came up last year, the consensus was we would discuss TRT, during regular budgeting.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I had seen an draft agenda summary that included the TRT conversation. It looks like that didn't actually end up on the official agenda. So my apologies for mentioning that if it wasn't germane to this conversation. Okay.
Yeah, anyone have any questions or comments to start us out? Luckily, I appreciate everybody's work, especially healthcare and EMS, in kind of making our jobs easier by agreeing to a lot of this stuff beforehand.
Yeah, that's a lot easier.
Yeah,
big win.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice when,
We've had some really.
yeah, Bill.
My question would be on the 50% that they each agreed to $1,640,000. Is that each, or that gets split 50-50 because you've got it on both of their line items?
Yeah, so that's just currently, that's a number I used, which is Steven's projection that we'll discuss later on in this meeting, split half and half.
So that number is the full amount.
The combined, yeah, it would be 33.2, 3.3 million.
So it's each.
It's each.
Yes, I had a comment or maybe some questions about the mineral lease monies. I don't, kind of, I don't know who the resident expert is about spending those, but my understanding is we can't, they have to go to some kind of separate entity. And that's why we have these separate special service districts that are independent and we don't tell them what to do. And I think that's because of some, quirk in federal law about how the, mineral lease monies are distributed. But I'm a little bit unclear. I think we do get to decide, which, that's what we're doing right now is deciding which special service districts, and we can also create new districts. So in some sense, that mineral lease money is, we have a fair amount of freedom to spend it. And I think in the past, in past discussions, the desire was that for the money that we're sending to the transportation special service district, that would be spent on flood control because we've got kind of other revenue streams that are dedicated to B-roads, and the state has increased those recently. So now B-roads are even better funded than they were when the decision was initially made. And we don't, have a lot of options for getting money for flood control. So I just, I think I was surprised in the presentations of the previous meeting that it seemed like the bulk of the spending this year, this special service district, was on road projects. Whereas I think the previous few years it had been mostly floods, like something at the Jackson Street Reservoir. And I'm just wondering if there's some way that, my feeling is that if they're intent on spending money on roads, then we should send the money somewhere, the mineral lease money somewhere else, because we've got other ways to fund roads. And I don't know if we want to write them a letter or make it clear that, future funding is contingent on the money being spent on flood control. But I just thought that was worth raising, or we could create a new district that's purely flood control, or I don't know who amends their bylaws, whether it's that board or whether the county does it.
Transportation.
Yeah, like how one amends the bylaws of a special service district to, for the things they can do their spending on. So so those were half comments, half questions, but I just wanted to raise the issue.
Yeah, no, I think those are good points. Mike?
In my understanding of the district, or the special service district, is that the reasoning on their charter, their state's roads first, flood mitigation came in later. They are looking at putting more money towards flood mitigation, but that's a year and a half into being able to dedicate money to that. These were all previous projects, and flood mitigation will be taking. It won't be taking 100% of the funding, as the charter still says roads in there, but they will be dedicating more effort towards flood mitigation. That's just more recent than long term. Roughly 2 years that I know.
Yeah, so I guess I was wondering maybe the charter should be changed to just focus on flood mitigation. And I don't know if we'd have to create a new district to do that, or whether the existing district can modify it.
Not entirely sure about the creation of a new district. I just know that they'll be taking on what they can.
Yeah, Mary?
I would think we would be able to keep it within that district. I think creating another district is a little more complicated than just creating it. And I think we can, especially now, I would assume. I know Bill Jackson and everybody there, their concern for the flood is way high. But I do think it would behoove us to, let the district know that we would really like the money being spent on flood mitigation. I don't think there's anything in the charter. I'd like to look at it. I don't think there is a percentage that has to be spent on roads.
Right.
I believe that they could spend the whole thing on flood mitigation if they wanted.
And I think in other recent years, they have, or at least a larger fraction. My feeling, before Mike, I was liaison to the board, so I have some familiarity with it. I think for board members, the road projects are a lot more fun. It's something really concrete. You get to see the results. It's, I think, more satisfying for them versus I think during the time I was there, like one year they spent zero, they just kept it in the bank, and the next year they made a big donation to the Jackson Street Reservoir. That's somehow a less satisfying way to spend the money. But I do think it's what the county, because we have other ways of funding B roads, I just don't think it makes sense to put any mineral lease money toward B roads. I feel like that was maybe communicated informally a few years ago, and then that message is kind of wearing off. And I'm just wondering if there's some way we can make it more formal, like write a letter or something like that.
Yeah,
No.
Trish, or go ahead, Mike. Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just looking at their, I would assume it's their charter, Grand County, Transportation Special Service District. And one of the things within that, when you go down to their bullet points, it says replacement and construction of bridges and culverts. So I would think that that would immediately fall into flood mitigation. And another one was may include but are not limited to the acquisition of land or easement, stormwater control generated from the right of ways of stormwater control passing. Anyway, so a lot of this does kind of spin around, it appears, flood mitigation efforts. So seems like it would be an easy sell if
Yep.
we just motivate them to do that.
I fully see it being received well. I mean, not even if you would like to write a letter, I completely understand, but I can pass that along. I mean, real quick. The reason it would be better taken if I reached out, or because the special service district was created, or districts were created to receive that PILT and mineral lease money, so that the county couldn't have direct influence over that. It was so having direct influence over that, and like saying withhold or create another one, could be a slippery slope, because we're not supposed to have direct say on what that special service district does with that money. But I do know that they all care, like personally, like Mary said here, and are wanting to take on more flood mitigation projects. So I see it all received well, but we also still need to get members on the board on the transportation board. We're still acquiring people.
It's hard to get.
Yeah,
It is. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
My memory of, was that, when the district was created, the B roads were really struggling. And this was a way to get more money to them because there wasn't other fundings. Like now we get, they have those new taxes on gas and such, and so there's more funding. And then we changed the charter, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years, it's so hard to remember, to add flood mitigation, because we found out that there, we really had a good flush fund for the B roads. The only reason I would think it'd be nice if we reached out to the board and told them that this is what we want to do, but I think just like what you mentioned, getting board members and keeping board members is a struggle. And I think having something concrete that is in the minutes and, says this helps future. It's not so much for them, it's for the record, so that in the future they know this is what is wanted. That would be the reason I would see the need to send a letter.
Trish?
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the other things in this resolution, just for the future, Mike, is like, once we do get that updated Spanish with the storm drain master plan, which we're talking about, you know, updating that because it's from 2011, this is actually in their resolution that they're doing flood mitigation, spinning around that master plan. So it might be like an year or so that they could update this and put in the new master plan too. So then we know that the projects are coming off of that.
Didn't they come in with a pretty large ask this year? I don't think it'd be without reason to ask them what they're looking for, if I recall when Archie presented, and I'm sure that there's ways. I know that there's a lot of talk and hopefully some action that follows up around this flood mitigation, but I'm sure that the county has ways to fund that if we're gonna do it through them, other than just this PILT money.
On a minimal basis, no?
Mill.
Yeah.
But either way, we can find money to put into that department if we're gonna ask them to specifically start looking at flood mitigation. So where do we come up with some more money? I think his ask this year was considerably higher than last year's, but you know, it doesn't look like there's any increase in a lot of years, so.
By far, oh, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
by far, this is another, it behoove us and, the Transportation Special Service District to partner, like Bill's saying here, we provide money if they provide money. None of these projects are cheap, so this good opportunity, even including, I mean, Transportation Service, Special Service District, Moab City, you know, Grant County, these are all our projects to team up on, so another one, but.
Yeah, I think a letter just kind of highlighting that, we have a bunch of priorities in the community around flood control mitigation. Be nice to just kind of have on the record in the minutes. That sort of stuff. I think that is probably easier step than trying to change the ratios or create a new district. So,
It's like a letter suggesting instead of dictating, and then also working with our liaison here.
And then it's, yeah, Bill Jackson has a lot to do with it. He works really closely.
Okay,
And so I should specify that in the letter, in the Transportation District's request letter, they did request 50% of the state PILT funding, which is the blue row that I've shared with y'all in the tracking spreadsheet that I made. And so that's currently allocated. There's not any of that currently allocated to the Transportation Special Service District, or at least in the last few years. That's currently allocated 50% to Grant County EMS, 30% to the Recreation Special Service District, and 20% to the school district. So there could be a decision point there to reallocate some of that state PILT.
it's the
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting changing any of the percentages this year. And I also think if if we want to spend extra money on flood mitigation, it makes sense just to spend it directly ourselves rather than funneling it, it just doesn't gain us anything. I just wanted to, we can't tell them what to do directly, but we can tell them under what conditions we'll continue to fund them. And I guess we could sort of hint that next year's funding will depend on them spending all of their money on flood mitigation. That they could do what they want. But to me, that approach makes sense. And if it's just communicated by Mike, that's great. If we need a letter, either way, whatever. And I think that's a message that's been communicated before, but after a few years, it's kind of where memories start to fade.
We might have lost members that knew about it.
right.
And
Yeah.
new ones at this point, so.
in regards to Gabe's question about the blue line, right now, this draft has it as state PILT at 0 to the Transportation District, or
Yeah.
Folks comfortable with that, or is that,
I don't wanna start changing. this.
yeah, I was ready to go to bat for EMS.
No.
I was ready to go.
You're already, no.
I'm not in favor of changing any of those.
Where's this coming from?
I mean, you've got two teachers, yeah, that's gonna be a tough fight.
All right,
Recreation, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about that.
start tossing other people under the bus.
Okay, so we've made that decision, basically. Kevin,
Yeah. And then just another thought to throw out there, and I don't mean to make this workshop take longer than it needs to. But at least as long as I've been on the commission, we've just kind of repeated the same commission percentages from last year with relative change. I mean, there's for the healthcare special service district, they've negotiated things and just what they recommend.
Yeah.
At some point, we might want to just take a fresh look and see, is this really, just remind ourselves what restrictions we have on these various different funding sources. And, I somehow think, whatever percentages we settled on 5 years ago, they're not going to be the ideal percentages.
Yeah.
Definitely to the future. And I know it's a lot of work, and I've been kind of glad to say, okay, same as last year. That's an easy conversation to have. But maybe next year when I'm not here anymore, you guys can take on the hard work of deciding.
it's, no, that makes sense, Kevin, for sure. And we're gonna have new commissioners on board, so maybe new priorities, but also doing it not during budget season, maybe during a slower meeting, we could have a workshop or something to hash that out. I don't know, probably none of us will remember until budgeting season next year, but it could be a good opportunity to revisit some of these percentages.
But I am glad that EMS and healthcare special services did a little bit.
Yeah.
Split.
For sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Would it be possible, Gabe, to get Steve maybe in the future to put some kind of a chart together for each one of these funding sources so that we know whether it's going up or down?
Yeah, that would be super helpful. I agree.
I mean, that would have some determination to it. I realize Mr. Clapper wants to have an arm wrestling match for EMS here or whatever, but the reality of it is those numbers, where are they changing? What's going up and down, and is that then putting a hardship on EMS or somebody else just based off of the fact of where they're trending? So that would be somewhat helpful for me on the see what the trend has been. That'd be very good program for the accessory other conversation. In terms of just a big problem about versus restrictions. If we had a description with that chart that showed what the legal intended uses of those funds are, that would also help so that some determination can be made to make sure we're not straying outside of that narrative.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea. I like that. And one thing that's concerned me in the past is in some cases, like maybe the Recreation Special Service District, its funding each year is some percentage of some mineral lease money. But that means we spend a lot of money on recreation and mineral lease monies are going up, and we make cuts to recreation and mineral lease monies are going down. That just makes no sense. Our recreation budget should not be strongly tied to mineral leases. And what would make more sense for me is if we just said, okay, they need $500, $1,000 a year, or whatever it is, and we'll do some of that with the mineral lease. And if that falls short, we'll just make up for it with the general fund. That type of approach might not be appropriate for every single one, but in some cases, I think that would make sense.
So on your chart, back then, just on going off of what Kevin had there, the top number, if we're looking at recreation SSD, the number there in the white column, but it's black print for 2019, 2020, that's showing what each year they received. Is that correct? Total.
The total. So
Okay.
that's the sum of the
Yeah.
Okay.
colored cells, yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other decision points we need to come to during the workshop?
My recollection, in the packet, we've got a version of the motion that includes all the percentages that are in the spreadsheet you gave us.
Did have it.
And then we've got another version where it's all blank if we wanted to go crazy and make some changes.
So back to the recreation SSD, as I'm understanding this a little better. What's the reason for the 71,000 versus last year at 137,000?
That was outlined in their presentation. I don't recall the rationale exactly.
It might have just been their total. I can't remember either, Mike. It was their total, like what the projects they had at OSTA and then the grants they wanted to give away? I can't remember.
It wasn't just the grants, I remember it being the projects.
Right.
They did some big projects at OSTA.
Yeah,
One was,
they always do the doors
Yeah.
or something.
So is that 71,000 figure in the far right column, is that in addition to the 137 that we've been giving them, or is it instead of the 137?
Their requested TRT is reduced.
Okay, so they're asking.
Right.
Yeah, my impression of that was I appreciated that sort of making a request based on actual projects.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's
That is really
it's
great.
rare and
Phil, thank
commendable.
you.
I remember it being far
Worth
less
it
than
by a lot of money in the future.
so that's
Yeah.
why the number went down.
Project,
Oh.
what better
Yeah,
show that I
fencing
know,
project,
okay, yeah.
Yes.
Don't ask for us, I got
Right,
project.
fencing.
Okay, so just to round that discussion, that in 2019 and 2020, we were not giving them any TRT, which is it's mitigation money that is in effect as general fund money. And then that ramped up 65,000 to 137 for a couple of years. Now they're proposing to take it back down.
What is the RFC next to TRT?
That's the one fit.
I mean, what does it stand for?
So
That's right, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, it's not in effect.
Yeah.
It's competing with film and other things.
All right, is there,
Motion won't include any TRT fundings for the
right,
end.
that'll be later, yeah. So is there anything else that we need to decide at this workshop before, we get to those action items later in the agenda? It looks, I don't see any, so just. Yeah. Okay, so. Pretty cut and dry, okay. Anybody else have anything they want to, add to the conversation about this before we?
Have a break.
Yeah, quick break before our commission meeting.
Quick break.
Quick break. All right. Thank you guys. That was easy. It is 3:43. I will now adjourn this special Grand County Commission workshop. Thank you.
In honesty, if you. What do you guys?